Hello, Space Coast, and welcome to another episode of Florida Today's Eye on Brevard. I'm Rob Landers. This week, our own Isadora Rangel is going to sit down with Florida Today's investigative team leader, Bobby Block, to talk about an investigation into a sheriff's office policy. But before we get to that, joining me right now in the studio is Isadora Rangel.
Hello.
Hey, okay, so we've got a lot of stuff that we want to cover
Yes.
in a very short amount of time because I know we have the interview with you and Bobby that we want to get to. Let's talk about SpaceX. So, historic launch last week.
The good thing about it is people like me who are not space fans or who don't watch every single launch, we're actually excited about this one.
I know.
At least that's my personal view of it.
So, most powerful rocket on the planet, 27 Merlin engines. That's like taking 3 Falcon 9s, strapping them all together, and then sending it off into space. And then 2 of those boosters land safely back at Cape Canaveral.
And simultaneously.
Right, at the same time,
like,
it was like we were being invaded.
Yeah.
It was a really cool shot. I know, right? Like Marvin the Martian's going to come running out. And then the third booster, of course, apparently hit the ocean pretty hard and was damaged in coming back down. But still, bravo to SpaceX. And now there's a car on its way to Mars.
Yes. Starman, right?
Starman.
Yeah. So, and I think my favorite part is I'm a David Bowie fan, and the car will play Space Oddity, but I heard the battery is going to run out eventually. So, but I was pleased to know that David Bowie will be playing in space.
Well, you would have thought that SpaceX would have taken some of those solar-powered shingles or something and built a license plate out of that Tesla so that it could have been absorbing some rays from the sun to keep powering David Bowie.
And who knows how long the car will last? I mean, with radiation, it's something you often hear from people.
Radiation, asteroids, microasteroids, everything blasting that thing in between here and Mars. So.
But my favorite part was the conversation on Twitter. People saying, did Elon Musk get away with a perfect murder? And then
who is Starman?
Where's Jeff Bezos? And I was like, well, what a perfect plot just to like get rid of a body, you know? So, oh, we're sending Starman to space.
And she is, of course, quoting Twitter and is not alleging that Elon Musk actually did anything wrong. Okay, my favorite thing that I was seeing on social media was watch out for the scams, win a free Tesla, and you only have to go to space to claim it. So.
But this is a great publicity stunt for Tesla. I mean, we don't know whether it will boost sales. That's a pretty expensive car.
It's a really expensive car.
$200,000. But it's good for him. I mean, obviously, nowadays, now that we're privatizing that sector of space exploration, I mean, you need to have the publicity stunts and all of that, and to keep people interested.
Well, speaking of privatization, there was another story that happened this week that ties right into that. President Trump, in his budget, has said that he wants to defund the International Space Station as of 2024 and turn it over to the hands of possibly either all of the international partners or to the private space sector. Thoughts?
Yeah, well, Senator Bill Nelson said the budget is a non-starter, and even people in the industry seem a little skeptical, according to our story at Florida Today. I think the issue is, do we have enough time to get ready to transition the station from being run by the government to a private entity or space partners? And Trump in his budget says that they want to focus more on moon exploration, going back to the days of Apollo. And I mean, it all sounds very great, but then what about all the research that's being done on the station? And my question is, what happens to that? Who does it belong to? Now it's going to become private property, and will the public have access to all of that great research that's going on?
Right.
Yeah, so there's a lot of questions being raised about this, and I think the question is, will we have enough time to transition, and who's going to take over, and do we want Russia to be running the International Space Station, because they are our biggest partners there.
Right. Okay. So my thoughts on this are the space station is not going to last forever. It was never intended to last forever. We knew going into this that we were investing billions upon billions of dollars to build this thing, and that it wasn't going to stay in the sky forever. NASA has been looking at options at do we bring it back down? But what hazard and what potential threat to people on Earth is there if they bring it back through the atmosphere and crash it back to Earth? So I think handing it over and kind of turning the keys over to the private sector and allowing the private sector to step in and continue having a presence in low Earth orbit as we push forward and go to the moon and look forward to Mars is probably a really good idea.
Yeah, and NASA spends about $3.5 billion annually on the ISS.
Right.
That's a lot of money. I mean, there's always people who question what the value of the space program is, and I mean, you always have that discussion. But Congress has directed NASA to study the feasibility of extending the ISS to 2028 or 2030. But that study is not complete.
Right.
So it seems like you have two different messages going on, one from the White House and one from Congress. And obviously, Congress ultimately needs to approve the budget. And we know what the president proposes a lot of times is just a blueprint of what he wants, and a lot of times he doesn't get everything that he wants. So it's going to be up to Congress.
Right. One of the things that I know that people in Congress are saying is that they don't want us left with no place for astronauts to go. But at the same time, right now, we're not actually flying astronauts from U.S. soil, so I kind of see the whole let's build something, let's go someplace else, let's expand beyond. SpaceX and Boeing are both getting to a point where they're going to start launching rockets within the next year or two.
Yeah.
So it just
rockets,
right.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
To start pushing that boundary again and getting back into the actual space race.
Yeah, it'd be kind of cool to go back to the moon. I mean, I am not a space expert, but I see if there is value in going back to the moon. Is that more of just showing the American strength in space exploration, or what are we going to gain? I mean, I don't know. I cannot compare the ISS to moon exploration. That'd be kind of cool to have someone land on the moon again.
I think it's a great launching. From everything that I have read and studied, it will be a great launching point for us to go to Mars. Great observatory on the dark side of the moon, because then you don't have the light from the moon kind of interfering with looking out into the heavens. So yeah, I think it's a pretty good idea to go back. Okay, so enough about space. When we come back, Isadora is going to sit down with our investigations team leader to talk about an investigation into Sheriff Wayne Ivy's policy. Stay with us.
Mother, daughter, wife, missing. On the night of August 17th, 2006, Brandy Hall walked out of the Malabar fire station. What happened next remains a mystery. One thing we know for certain, Brandy never made it home.
Where are you, Brandy? Where are you? Dear God, where are you?
Welcome back to Florida Today's Eye on Brevard. I'm Rob Landers. Joining me yet again in the studio is Florida Today engagement editor Isadora Rangel. Isadora, welcome back.
Thank you.
Okay, so last week you got to sit down with Watchdog editor Bobby Block to talk about a change in Sheriff Wayne Ivy's office regarding FDLE investigations. What's this story about?
So the policy change is basically the sheriff's office in the past used the FDLE to oversee deputy-involved shootings. Now the sheriff's office feels that it can do it alone.
Okay, well, I'm really interested in finding out what Bobby Block had to say. Watch this.
Bobby, thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So explain what your investigation uncovered about the sheriff's office.
Well, we really didn't uncover anything. What we did is we looked into a policy that he started about a year ago, which was to no longer include the Florida Department of Law Enforcement's Public Integrity Squad into investigating police-involved, or in this case, deputy-involved shootings. Instead of using this special squad that's paid for by the state, he decided that he would use his own resources, his own men, to investigate the incidents surrounding any time a deputy was involved in shooting someone, and particularly involved in fatalities. And as we talked to more people, it became apparent that the sheriff contends that there's a trend in his direction where people are giving this up, and we found out that that was not the case. And we also, as we talked to people, the question became very clear in our minds: was this good public policy? In the current politically polarized times we live in, does it make sense not to have an impartial third party come in and take a look at these incidents?
So what happened a year ago that made you realize this policy shift?
Well, what had happened was that in 2016 there was a shooting involving an off-duty deputy. And at the time, even before the investigation started, Sheriff Ivey came out and appeared to indicate that the shooting on the face value was legitimate, was a good shooting, that there was an element of self-defense. And the FDLE was brought in, and within a week, the officer was found, the deputy was found to have lied about the story that he had told, and that indeed it wasn't what they call a good shooting, that the deputy was ultimately charged with a manslaughter, I believe it was, and is currently awaiting trial. After that event, there seems to have been a shift, and in March of last year, in another deputy-involved shooting, it was the first case in which Sheriff Ivey decided that he was going to go it alone. Now, Sheriff Ivey insists that the Hofsa case, the case in which the off-duty deputy shot a 25-year-old father of 3, was not the rationale for this, and he claims that there were other cases in which the FDLE was brought in to take a look at this. But according to FDL records, the last officer-involved shooting case that they were involved with was the Hofsa case.
And so why look into this, especially after Ferguson and so many police-involved shootings? And, you know, could this affect how the community looks at the sheriff's office?
Well, I mean, I think that what we discovered and what the reporters found was, indeed, around the country, what has become the standard is to invite impartial, you know, third parties in to take a look at it. It provides, you know, an element of protection in some ways. Sheriff Ivey insists that the efficiency of it, he claims that the FDLE has lost resources, that they use his crime scene unit, that they stick to his people. At the end of the day, they're only a thin veneer over his own investigation, so he doesn't see that as the case. And he points to the fact that in his, as he said, you know, half of at least the sheriff's counties, the sheriff's offices in the state do not use the FDLE. But the fact of the matter is the following: FDL resources for officer-involved shootings has not been cut. As a matter of fact, they have increased. They have decided that they don't need to use their own crime scene unit, which they used to have once upon a time, because they're not the first responders anymore. The other thing is that what we found is that 54% of all police agencies in the state, and actually more than half, 14 of the, well, there's an increase of 14. In 2016, there were only 20 counties that used the FDLE, of 67. Now there are 34. That's a 70% increase, and it's more than half. And in more than half of all the sheriffs and police agencies use the FDLE. And the reason is exactly like what you said. It is about appearances. In the aftermath of Ferguson, when you want to make sure that your community has faith, that you are not allowing your own biases to interfere. I mean, I imagine it's very difficult to investigate your own. You know, I know that people say that it's not hard, and I know that Sheriff Ivey says that he takes pride into weeding out bad apples, but the fact of the matter is your men have to investigate their own. And the idea of bringing in someone else is done, and what people say is it has become the standard because it helps assuage public doubt that the investigation might not be pure. And that's why it's done around the country. And
you talked to the sheriffs in Orange County and in Martin County. Tell us what you heard from them on why they use and don't have a contract with the FDLE.
Well, let's start with Orange County. One of Sheriff Ivey's arguments is that he has the size and the resources and the experience to do this, which is why he does that. Well, Orange County, which is next door, which includes Orlando and many of some of the theme park areas and other tourist areas, they do it all the time. They routinely use FDLE precisely because it helps ensure a better public reception. And they certainly, it'd be hard to argue that Brevard's resources are bigger or more experienced than Orange County, which has a larger population, much more diverse and spread out over a larger area. A smaller county to our south, Martin County, the sheriff there does not use the FDLE, but they use a slightly different system. Here in Brevard, the sheriff does the investigation of the shooting and then hands his findings over for review to the state attorney's office, and they review the investigation and make a determination about that. In Martin County, the state attorney does a parallel investigation with their own investigators at the same time that the sheriff is doing his investigation. So immediately you have a separate investigation. At the same time, Martin County, it appears, has a FBI liaison officer who's also used. So that although Sheriff Snyder may not use the FDLE, he does have all of the elements of a third party. And I think that's really what the question is. Whether you use the FDLE or someone else, the idea is that you want to have some element of a third party. And again, what we were told, for this story, there were over 17 interviews, I think 10 people quoted by name in the story, at a national level, at a state level, at a local level, including 2 FDLE sources and spokespeople. And you know, what emerged from what we found is that the industry standard, particularly in these times, is that having another third party involved provides a certain level of public confidence that going your own does not.
So what has been the sheriff's response since the story came out?
Well, he has slammed the newspaper. He has accused the newspaper of doing a disservice to what he calls a dwindling readership, which is not true because I think our readership is actually higher than it's ever been. He's also accused us of excluding information, but everything that I've ever heard him explain, at least on on a radio show recently, and I think in private comments to Bob Gabordi, the executive editor of the paper, everything he's talking about is in that article, including the idea that he polices our own, that he believes that the FDLE's resources are the problem, and that he has the experience to do it. All that's in there. I mean, you know, but he is, look, this is not personal. This is about policy. And this is about questioning whether a policy, in wake of a very recent police, a deputy-involved shooting after a high-speed car chase on US 1, whether this is the best way to go about this. And which is why we chose the timing for this. I was very aware of the story, and I was saying the time would come when this was the right story to look at. And after this event, we decided to basically take a look at what we had been investigating it for months, you know, gathering string on it. And because of the recent shooting, we thought it was a good time to basically take a look.
How about what have our readers said in the public? What has been the most prominent response from the community?
Overwhelming, based on Facebook responses, comments on our own article pages, is that people don't get it. They don't understand. They don't understand what the cost is. I mean, the general view is the policy really about efficiency, or is it about optics, how it's perceived? And I think most people think it's a no-brainer. I mean, at least based on comments that we've had on the Facebook pages and on the articles, our people are a little bit confused. Why would you not want to do this?
And State Representative Randy Fine said he expressed interest in filing a bill, right?
There have been several attempts over the last few years to basically require. Right now, there is no state law requiring police agencies and sheriff's offices to use the FDLE in cases of officer-involved shootings. There have been attempts to kind of do that before, but they've never managed to get out of committee for one reason or another. My understanding is that Randy Fine said that he wanted to take a look at this again, possibly with the eye towards introducing a bill, but it wouldn't be in this session.
So we have an elected official, the sheriff, who's probably not used to this level of scrutiny over what he does. How is it to go up against the most prominent and powerful Republican in the county as the watchdog editor? How do you approach that?
I spent most of my life as a war correspondent where people didn't want me around in the first place. Look, Wayne Ivey's an elected official. And elected officials, which will sometimes claim that they're beyond, they shouldn't be looked at. I'm sorry, it's our job to take a look at You know, a lot of the pronouncements that the sheriff has made, you know, once he basically says everything's good, it is our prerogative and right to basically make sure that what he's claiming is good, and it works as he says it does. In this particular case, I'm not sure that that adds up.
How about for your reporters? Obviously, they need to have a relationship with the sheriff for future stories. How was it for them, and how do you sort of not coach them? How do you motivate them to pursue these more difficult stories?
It's our job, and I encourage them to do their job, and I encourage them to basically, you know, we have a mission. You know, we do have a mission. You know, we served, you know, recently, as I think Bob's talked a lot about the Post, but there's a line from the Supreme Court decision in that particular case about, you know, our role is to serve the governed, not the governors. And I remind them of that fact. Look, years ago when I was covering Homeland Security for the Wall Street Journal, and I had a very good relationship with the Homeland Security Secretary, Tom Ridge, and we used to get together for dinner regularly, and on this one particular day I had written a very, very negative story. And he invited me to dinner, and he slapped me on the back and asked me how things were up, and I said to him, I thought you were going to yell at me. And he goes, for the story you wrote? And I said, yeah, and he laughed, and he said, I didn't like it, but there was nothing wrong with it. I don't agree with it, but there were no factual errors. And hey, I've been doing this a long time. You know, things will move on. And that's a very different attitude than what we've seen coming out of elected officials here in Brevard County. Our role is our role. Their job is their job, and from time to time we're going to be at opposite ends of the equation. It's just the way it was meant to be.
Yeah, let's hope they learn. Bobby, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Okay, so as is the case with many of the stories that we cover here at Florida Today, this story is still evolving and unfurling. So keep watching the pages of Florida Today and on floridatoday.com for updates, and we will be back in just a minute.
Mother, daughter, wife, missing. On the night of August 17th, 2006, Brandy Hall walked out of the Malabar fire station. What happened next remains a mystery. One thing we know for certain, Brandy never made it home.
Where are you, Brandy? Where are you? Dear God, where are you?
Welcome back to Florida Today's Eye on Brevard. I'm Rob Landers. Now, before the break, you saw Bobby Block, Florida Today's watchdog editor, talking about a change in policy in the Brevard County Sheriff's Office regarding FDLE coming in to be a third-party investigator in deputy-involved shootings. Joining me again in the studio is Florida Today engagement editor Isadora Rangel to talk about a recent public policy, public perception issue with the police. Isadora?
So basically what happened was this Palm Bay police officer went to McDonald's and he went through the drive-thru, and the clerk refused to hand him his drink. And then she told another clerk, I don't serve cops. So he was very upset, went on Facebook and wrote about what happened, and that prompted our story about it. Our editorial board actually gave the clerk, I guess, a thumbs down for refusing to do her job. I mean, after all, we're paid to do something, and then we should fulfill our duties. And the issue is, I mean, the way I see it, we're often talking about not labeling people and not putting everyone from a specific group into the same category, and then to refuse to serve a cop simply because of his profession. I mean, first, it's very unprofessional on her part, and also, I mean, it speaks to, having more respect for law enforcement, but also just because we've heard stories in Ferguson and other places in the nation and all the police-involved shootings that have happened in recent years doesn't mean that you should not serve someone, So I was kind of enraged by that. It was kind of childish. We don't know who the clerk is. We don't know what has happened to her, if she was fired. But I don't see that as the right way to fix the issues between policing and communities.
I agree with an asterisk. We all have bad days, and I get that. We also don't know enough about this clerk. Based on my knowledge of first jobs, McDonald's is a very easy first job to get into. Not really sure about the maturity level. Obviously, not very mature if she's going to refuse service to anyone if her job is to serve someone. But we all have bad days, and I don't know that firing her is going to make her attitude towards the police any better. This is a training opportunity to say, okay, Not all police are bad. Not, you know, I mean, I don't know what your experience was or what her experience was with police in the past, but, you know, the police aren't the bad guys.
Yeah, I don't think she should get fired. I mean, we didn't know her history. If she had
Right.
been a good employee so far.
And that's
yeah.
what I'm seeing a lot of on social media
Yeah.
is they should fire her. She should be fired. She should be fired. And it was like, is that really going to improve
Yeah.
the attitude towards the police?
And there are other ways that employers can punish their employees. She can get written up. She can get, you know, whatever sanctions McDonald's has. But yeah, I don't think she should get fired. But, you know, having known law enforcement people throughout the years, and I think that, you know, it's just like with journalists. You have maybe a few bad journalists. Does that mean that you start disrespecting every single journalist? Does that mean that all journalists are bad? You have bad teachers, you have bad doctors. Does that mean that you start disrespecting an entire class of people?
No, I don't think you disrespect an entire class of people or
Yeah.
or an entire profession.
Yeah.
You know, just like we're not fake news, they're not fake cops.
Yeah.
So.
And the irony of it all is Palm Bay Police has this program called, believe it's called Coffee with a Cop. I don't know the exact name, but basically these are community meetings where people come in to discuss police issues, and that same McDonald's has hosted that meeting.
Right.
So.
Again, just like you were talking about with Bobby in the last segment, it's all about public perception. And, you know, again, I really hope that rather than pouncing and firing and immediately, you know, discrediting, you know, this clerk, that this is taken as an opportunity to say, hey, you know, hang on a second, what happened? Let's fix this and move on from this, because Tim Lancaster is a 23-year veteran of the Palm Bay Police Force. I mean, he is a veteran cop and does really good things in the community. So, Isadora, thanks for coming in.
you.
It's always fun when you're in and we're just talking about the news. So
Thank you.
That's going to do it for this week on Florida Today's Eye on Brevard. Be sure to join us again next Wednesday right here on WEFS and on FloridaToday.com. And be on the lookout for the Florida Today Eye on Brevard podcast, coming soon to iTunes, Google Play Music, and SoundCloud. Thanks for watching.